Go. All right, so factoring. When I'm factoring, for this is first example, this is a trinomial. And if you notice, my leading coefficient is a what? Yep, you're right. It's a 1. Good. So what I'm going to have you do is go ahead and label what's the A, what's the B, and the C. What's the A, B, and C? And remember, the form is always ax squared plus bx plus c. So in this problem, A was 1, B is 2, and C is 1. All right, so now that we know this, we want to factor this. How are we going to factor this? Use product and sum. The product is always going to be A times C. A times C. So what is A times C? 1 times 1, which is 1. And the sum is always going to be B. And what's B? 2. Great. So the product is A times C, and the sum is B. So that's step 1. Get your product and get your sum. Step 2, now we want to get factors of the product, which is 1. So what are the factors of 1? 1 and 1, as well as -1 and -1. Awesome. So those are all my factors of 1. Now what do you need? You want the factors of 1 that add to your sum, to the sum, which is 2. So which one would it be? Is it 1 and 1 or -1 and -1? Hopefully you have chosen 1 and 1. So it's going to be 1 and 1. If I multiply them, I get 1, which is the product. And if I add them, I get 2, which is the sum. Great. Now at this point, we have to ask ourselves, do we keep going and do grouping, or do we stop? Give you a second to think about it. Do you do grouping or do you stop? I hope you said you stop. Why do you stop? The leading coefficient is a 1, so you can jump right to your answer. So stop and jump right to the answer. So our factors were 1 and 1, so my answer is going to be x plus 1 times x plus 1, or you can write it as x plus 1 whole thing squared. Alright, so let's continue factoring. Here's another example. It's 2y squared plus y minus 3. And of course I want to factor it. And then again, it's a trinomial, so I'm going to factor it using product and sum. Alright, so first thing, let's label our pieces. What's the A? What's the B? And what is the C? What's A? It's 2. What's B? 1. And what's C? -3. The minus sign makes that -3. Okay, because remember the form is ax squared plus bx plus c. Okay, good. Now that I have the A, B, and C, let's get the product and the sum. So the product is A times C. A times C, and the sum is B. So what is A times C? That is 2 times -3, which is -6. So my product is -6, and my sum is just B, which is 1. Okay, so we got our product, we have our sum. Step 2, what are factors of the product? So what are factors of the product, which is -6? Let's write out all the factors. So I like starting with 1, so 1 comma -6, -1 comma 6, what else? 2 comma -3, and -2 comma 3. Any other ones? No. Good. So first step was product and sum. Product is always A times C. A times C. 2 times -3 is -6. Second step are the factors of -6. Here they are. Then the third step is factors of -6 that add to the sum. And the sum was 1. So what are the factors that add to the sum of 1? Factors of negative 6 that add to a sum of 1. Looks like it has to be negative 2, positive 3. If I multiply negative 2 times 3, I get negative 6, which is my product. If I add negative 2 plus 3, I get 1, which is my sum. So it works. Great. Then we go on to step 4. Step 4 says, should I do grouping or do I go straight to my answer? Do I have to do grouping? So let's write the word grouping with a question mark, maybe a couple question marks. Grouping. Do I have to solve this, factor this by grouping? The answer should have been yes. How do we know we have to use grouping versus going straight to our answer? If the leading coefficient equals anything other than 1, you must do grouping. If the leading coefficient is anything other than 1, you must do grouping. Alright, so what does grouping say? Grouping says replace the middle term, so replace y with the factors in step 3. So instead of writing a y, now you're going to write negative 2y plus 3y. So that becomes 2y squared minus 2y plus 3y minus 3. This piece used to be the same as 1y. Refer back to the original problem. This is 1y. Instead of writing 1y, now you write negative 2y plus 3y. Great. The next step is to group the first two terms together and group the last two terms together. So group the first terms together and group the last terms together. If I do that, I end up with parentheses 2y squared minus 2y plus, there should always be a plus sign in the middle here, plus 3y minus 3. Always a plus sign in the middle. So if this was to say minus 3y, you would still write a plus here and the negative would go on the 3. But in our case, it says plus 3y. So we write it as a plus and we leave 3 positive. Good. Now what? Now you want to factor each group. Factor each group. So my first group, what do they have in common? 2y squared, hold on a second, I'm sorry. 2y squared and 2y, what do they have in common? 2y, so I can factor out a 2y. And what am I left with on the inside? Well, 2 divided by 2, that's just 1. Y squared divided by y is y, good, minus 2 divided by 2 again is 1. Y divided by y, that's also 1. So I'm just left with y minus 1 on the inside. Plus, what do these two terms have in common? 3y and a 3. 3. So let's take out a 3. And what's left over on the inside? Y minus 1. Now, when your parentheses end up being the same, so here's a parentheses, this guy and this guy, when they are equal, we are filled up with happiness. And we know why, because that's the point of grouping. So, if your parentheses are the same, you factor it out, and you get y minus 1. Now the question is, what is left over on the inside? I factor out y minus 1, so allow me to do something real quick. If I factored out y minus 1, means it goes away, right? It's gone. Same thing here. It goes away. It's gone. What is left over? 2y plus 3. 2y plus 3. 2y plus 3. And that's the answer. That's factored now. So let me rewrite that. What was it? Y minus 1 and y minus 1. Good. So this is my final answer. Alright, so let's continue with our factoring journey. Next example, we have 3x squared plus 2x. Now, this is kind of like my other one where I had ax squared plus bx plus c, right? The only difference here, c is 0. It's not there. I don't see it. But since the c is gone, I can do something differently here. How about we focus on GCF? GCF stands for the greatest common factor. Basically, I have two terms here. I have 3x squared and I have 2x. What do these terms have in common? So let's see here. I have 3x squared and I have 2x. What do they have in common? They have an x in common. Therefore, my GCF is equal to x. GCF is x, which means when I factor this, I'm going to factor out an x. So an x is on the outside, and what's left on the inside? Well, the 3 is still there. And what is x squared divided by x? It's just x. Plus, the 2 is there. Now what's x divided by x? Is 1, so it's gone. Now this is factored, and that's my answer. X times quantity 3x plus 2. Unlike my other ones where I had trinomials and I had to use product and sum, since the c, or my constant term, equals 0, I can factor this using the greatest common factor. Let's see what else we have. Let's do some more examples. I'm looking through the book, so give me a second while I decide. I'm about to start flipping some pages. You can tell I wasn't prepared for more examples. Alright, let's do another one. How about this one? 4y to the 4th. Let me write it down. So let's call this example 4. And where is it? I just lost it. There it is. 4 times y to the 4th power minus 36y squared. And I want to factor this completely. Alright, I have two terms, right? Do these two terms have anything in common? They do. They have a 4 in common, and they have a y squared in common. So the GCF would be 4y squared. 4y squared, which means when I factor it out, I have 4y squared times, what's left on the inside? Well, 4 divided by 4 is 1. Y to the 4th divided by y squared is y squared. Minus 36 divided by 4 is 9. And again, y squared divided by y squared is 1. It cancels out. So now I end up with this 4y to the 4th minus 36y has become 4y squared times quantity y squared minus 9. But I'm not done factoring. I got to keep going. So let's see here. The outside's fine. He's going to ride along with us. He's not going anywhere. It's the middle, y squared minus 9. So it's either you recognize this as a perfect, what's my wordage? Give me a second while I think about what I want to call that thing. I don't want to call it the wrong thing. Either you recognize this as the difference of two squares. So the difference of two squares. Or you have to do product and sum. So let's assume that we didn't recognize it as the difference of two squares. Let's do our product and sum. So I'm going to focus on only this piece for the moment, which means I'm going to change colors. I'm going to use a different color. Let's use blue. So let's focus on y squared minus 9. Okay, I need it to be a trinomial, 3 terms. What term am I missing? Yep, I'm missing the middle term. So that's y squared plus 0y minus 9. Okay, put the middle term in there. It's 0. Now let's do this. What's the a? What's the b? And what is the c? A, the leading coefficient, 1. B is the middle coefficient, 0. And c is my constant term, which is negative 9. Great. Now we can start our process. What's the product? And what is the sum? Remember, the product is a times c. A times c, which is 1 times negative 9, which is negative 9. And the sum is b, which is 0. So the product is negative 9 and the sum is 0. step 2, factors of negative 9. What are the factors of negative 9? Well, we have 1, negative 9, negative 1 and 9, 3, and negative 3. And that's it. Good. Third step, the factors of negative 9 that add to the sum, which was 0. So which of these factors will add to the sum of 0? Yes, 3 as well as negative 3. 3 times negative 3 is negative 9. 3 plus negative 3 is 0. So it works. You always want to make sure it works. The product is negative 9. 3 times negative 3 is negative 9. And you always want to make the sum work. 3 plus negative 3 is 0. Good. So the factors of negative 9 that add to 0 are 3 and negative 3. Alright, the fourth step. Do I have to do grouping? Do we have to do grouping? Think about it. Do we have to do grouping? The answer should have been no. The leading coefficient is a 1. If your leading coefficient is a 1, you can jump right to the answer. So jump right to the answer. No hesitation. And it's going to be x blank something times x blank something. What are the somethings I'm filling out here? These are the factors. This is a positive 3, so that's x plus 3. Why am I using x's all of a sudden? They should be y's, shouldn't they? Let's change that to a y. You don't mind if I write over this, do you? Nope. Okay. Good. So that should be y plus 3. And the other one is negative 3, so that should be y minus 3. So this piece just right here, y squared minus 9, is the same as saying y plus 3 times quantity y minus 3. So the entire thing factored, my final answer, let's go back to my red. My final answer is going to be the 4y squared, times y plus 3 times y minus 3. And that is factored completely.